Okay, I'm making this video as a video response to the TinFoilChef. I just finished watching your latest video on your attempt to land on Mars at Olympus Base, and I had a couple of thoughts that might be able to help you in your next attempt, and I thought it would be easier to do a video response rather than try to type things up. So overall, I thought it was a really good attempt. Actually, you've actually picked up Orbiter quite a bit of it, a lot faster than I have, a lot faster than I did when I was originally learning it. It took me a much more time to even get to Mars than it did you. But a couple things I noticed. Let me bring up the external MFD to make it large. Of course, I've already got Olympus Base targeted on map MFD. When we come over here to base sync, obviously you noticed eventually that you also have to target Olympus on base sync MFD. Even though you've already targeted it on map, it also has to be selected on base sync, and eventually you realize that. So we'll put that in first. There's something else to note that's kind of important about base sync, and that is this equator line here. You see where it says equator. If I click ED, it changes that over to direct. By default, it's set to equator, and in most cases this isn't what we want. You'll notice here, if I look at the PLC line, let me make that a little larger. And when you, for some reason, when you change the size of these MFDs, it resets that. I don't know why, but at any rate, let me reselect Olympus. But you'll notice here, when this is on equator by default, this PLC line, which is the amount of plane change that's going to be required to get in plane with the base, it says 0. Obviously that's wrong, because we have to do some amount of plane change in order to bring this number down to 0. And it turns out that in order for this to be correct, what you have to do is press this button over here, ED, and that switches between equator and direct, and we want to have it, at least for this purpose, we want to have it on direct. So now you'll see that the PLC line tells us how much plane change we need, and this is basically telling us that we need 13 seconds worth of main engine burn in order to bring 311.90 kilometers down to 0, and it also tells us the direction that we need. Now if we don't do that, if we leave it set on equator, then this is meaningless. This positive, negative, it doesn't mean anything. So in your video, you looked at it and correctly determined that, okay, well, this says positive, so actually in your video it was negative, so we need to go negative, and that's normally right. But since we have this set on equator, then this actually doesn't have any meaning. So we need to switch that over to direct, and now it's correct. So we can fast forward until the time to the node is, we want to be at a number that's about half of this, and about half of this is going to be like, 7 or maybe 6.8. So we'll fast forward. Getting pretty close. Go back to real time, and now we'll go to the orbit normal position. Actually, I guess I'll leave it over here. And this doesn't tell us when to do the burn, like the align plane MFD says, you know, engage engines or whatever it says. This doesn't tell us. We just have to know that when we're at half that number, then we're going to do the burn. So we're going to do the burn right now. We're going to do it for 13 seconds. Actually, we can just watch that. We're getting pretty close. So we kill the main engines, and now we'll just... Okay, there we are. We're down to 136 meters, and that is certainly good enough. So now we can turn this off, and this, of course, will change once we hit the atmosphere. There's going to be some changes, but now we can go prograde for the time being. And of course, now we need to fast forward to this orbit. So let's go around. Okay, we're getting up to that orbit. Okay, we're on our final orbit, so this is where we're planning to land. So if we want to do our deorbit burn when we're halfway around, then we need to go around to the other side. I like that. And we can also watch the distance readout over here. When this number stops counting, there it goes. It's counting down, so we're more than halfway around. So now we can do our retrograde burn. And there's a couple ways to do this. What I usually do is I'll go ahead and bring up aero brake, and of course, again, we have to target the base. It's easy to forget to do that, but it's important. And I noticed you struggled a little bit with getting over to the right screen. It's just two buttons, PG, PRJ, and then you're there. So now we'll do a little bit of a main engine burn. And notice as we're doing that burn, it's having an effect on our resistance, but that'll be okay. And we're just going to do that burn, of course, until the line ends on the base. Getting pretty close. And we're not going to worry about that off-base distance. We can fix that with just a little bit of bank. And that's close enough right there. So we can turn off the retrograde, go prograde now. And there was something else you mentioned in your video. Basically, we can now fast forward time until the Martian atmosphere starts to become an issue. On Earth, the entry interface is 120 kilometers. I actually don't know what the official entry interface is for Mars, but take into consideration, you know, that the Martian atmosphere is much thinner, and it doesn't extend up as high, you know, as it does on Earth. So we actually don't have to wait, or we don't have to worry about the atmosphere at 120 kilometers. We can actually go in quite a bit lower. And maybe something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and set this aside for now. And now we're going to go do our heads up maneuver.
Rotation.
And you pretty much don't have to worry about overheating. when you're coming in from orbital velocity, you're only traveling at 3.5 kilometers per second, so you're going much slower than you would be if you're trying to come from Earth to Mars and trying to do your braking burn, or I should say your atmospheric braking maneuver as part of that journey all the way from Earth. Since we're not doing that here, and you weren't doing that in your video, you're already in orbit, so you're traveling much slower. Instead of traveling at 6+ kilometers per second, you're only 3.3 or 3.5, so you're not going to really have any concern of overheating. We do need to close the radiator at some point. It really doesn't become too much of a problem on Mars because, again, the atmosphere is so thin, you can get away with having it open for quite a while. But if you just want to make it part of your checklist procedure, pick a number, say 80 kilometers, and we'll close it at 80 kilometers. So we'll turn on APU.
APU offline.
Close the radiator. And as part of this process, we'll open the air brake as well, just to help us slow down. Now I'll turn the APU off to get rid of some noise. Another thought here, the Martian atmosphere being as thin as it is, you don't really get a whole lot of braking out of it until you're like almost all the way down to the ground. 500 kilometers or excuse me, like 500 meters or like 1 kilometer above the ground. Until you get all the way down to that point, you get very little braking. Let's go ahead and set up our attitude hold.
APU auto start. Center of gravity shift online.
And you'll see over here it says that we're coming up short, but I'm completely okay with that. And the reason I'm okay with that is because our horizontal speed, once we finally get down to 1 kilometer above the ground or 500 meters above the ground, we're still going to be traveling at 300 or 400 or even 500 meters a second. So even though this says we're coming up short, I'm okay with that, because once we go level with the horizon and use the hover engines, we're still going to be traveling quite fast, and we're going to need some extra distance in order to slow ourselves down. I'm going to go ahead and bring this MFD back over and resize it a little bit. And even though I've got the base selected, I've still got to hit target in Olympus again, because every time you resize, for some reason it messes up your target. And I'll use this on the ride down to help me bank a little bit here and there. Go ahead and zoom in on this side. And we'll get our descent hold ready to go here. Go ahead and warp time ahead. I'm going to start putting in a little bit of bank. I'm not sure which way I need to bank. I believe it'll be this way. Looks like that might be wrong. It's hard to say. We're still up so far. We're not really getting any benefit out of the atmosphere, but now our distance off base is coming down a little bit. So we can go ahead and accelerate time for a while. Still got 1,500 kilometers to go.
Mach 16. Information.
Go ahead and come out of time warp for a moment.
80%.
Zero the bank. Control I to bring up object info. Spaceport, of course. And we'll select the long range. And we'll select one of the landing pads that are available. 129.70 looks good. And we'll have those ready when the time comes. Distance off base is increasing, so let's go ahead and dip our nose a little bit further down.
Mach 15.
And put in a little bit of bank. Guess that's actually the wrong way. Now it's going down. And I'm going to change this to 1 because we're going to land right away. Just fast forwarding time.
Mach 13. Mach 12.
Distance off base is pretty close to 0, so let's level out the bank.
Mach 11.
Now notice that the aero brake shows we're coming up short, but again, that's what we want. Do a little more banking.
Mach 10.
We'll go ahead and drop the nose a little bit more now. So we still got a little ways to go. Okay, let's bring the bank back closer to 0.
Mach 9.
Couple things we need to keep an eye on, obviously. Altitude, we don't want to drop. We don't want to hit the ground and crash. And we also want to keep an eye on our horizontal speed. Trying to find the balance here where we can arrive at the base when we have as little horizontal speed as we can get, and it won't go to 0. Like on Earth, you can almost, you can glide to the base and end up at the base with a horizontal speed that's very low. But the lowest you're going to get on Mars is, I think it's like something like 300 meters a second.
Mach 8.
Doing it this way, of course. There are other ways to do this. And we actually managed to climb up a little bit. We're skipping. Let's get more time ahead then. And now we're on our way back down. Now we're within 500 kilometers of the base. So let's get rid of this. And bring up... yeah. That's what we want. And get a more time ahead.
Mach 6.
Now we're getting some deceleration. Altitude's coming down.
Mach 5. Information. APU fuel 70%. Mach 4.
Go back to real time here. And we're going to zero out the AOA. In fact, we're going to switch to pitch. We're going to zero the pitch. You can see we're still coming up near the base. We might want to put in a little bit of pitch. Still 220 kilometers away from the base. And we still want to come down quite a bit, because you can see we've still got a substantial amount of horizontal speed. Yeah, we can go ahead and open the hover doors now. Open the retro doors. And do a little bit more time warp just to speed this up.
1,000.
And you notice the lower we get, the more
3,000.
we're decelerating. And right now what I can do also is put in this amount of delta V just to get an idea of how long it would take the retro engines to eliminate this much velocity. And it would take
2,000.
33 kilometers. So we still got time. I want to bring the altitude down, like I said, at least below a kilometer before I worry about engaging.
You are cleared to land.
Engaging the main engines. And on Mars, we're not going to worry about ripping the landing gear off because the atmosphere is so thin. You're not going to get as much pressure on the landing gear.
1,000. 900. 800.
Okay, down. We'll go ahead and engage the go ahead and engage the hover now. Now that we're at this altitude, we're going to continue to get some braking from the atmosphere. But you can see on Mars, the atmosphere just isn't thick enough to really slow you down. So we're 80 kilometers away from the base. Now what I can do is put this number in to burn time calculator, and it says that it would take the retro engines 22 kilometers to eliminate that much velocity. So we're still 73 kilometers out. We've got time, and I'll just keep updating burn time calculator with this number as I get closer.
600.
And it looks like we're drifting a little bit away from the base. So let me... see if I can put in a little bit of bank. Not sure which way.
Mach 2.
It's going the wrong way. And we'll update that again and put in 400. And it says we need 15 kilometers. And we're still 50 kilometers out. So we'll get ready to zero the bank here when we get the distance off base down to 0. It's good enough, and I think, are we close enough? We're getting almost close enough now that we'll have the landing pad up, so let's switch over to nav 2 at this point. Okay, now let's do another update on burn time. Put in this number. We'll go with 370. And that says we need basically 14 kilometers. So we're getting really close now to the time where we need to engage the retro engines in order to eliminate the remaining velocity. And let's zero out our pitch. Because I was accidentally climbing there, I did not mean to do that. And one final update, DV, let's put in 350, and that says we need 12 kilometers. So you can see here our distance is 19, 18, so we're going to engage the retro engines right about now. And that should put us near a dead stop once we get over toward the base.
Translation. Rotation. You are cleared to land. Subsonic.
We're going to be off to the side just a little bit, but it's okay. See our horizontal speed is 0.
Translation. Rotation.
So let's rotate toward the base.
900. Translation. 700. 600. 500. 400. 300.
Let's re-engage the descent hold.
Rotation. Translation.
And we've got a kilometer to go. We're just a little bit off there. Made a couple mistakes when I was adjusting the okay, there we go with that.
Rotation. Translation. Rotation. Translation.
And now we're 1 kilometer away from the base, or from the landing pad, and we're moving at 23 meters per second. We can use the retro engines. We don't need this anymore. Landing gear.
Gear down and locked. Information. APU fuel 60%.
And we can probably even... Now we're a little... Let's go ahead and turn on auto land. And let's not do that just yet. Eliminating our forward velocity.
Rotation. Translation.
Getting everything translated to the center of the landing pad. Now we'll go with auto land.
100. Rotation. Translation. 75. 50. 40. 30. 20. 15. 10. 8. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. Wheel stop.
And that's something... And that's something more like what you'd want to do for that particular method. It's not necessarily the best way to land on Mars in terms of fuel usage. It uses a little more fuel than is absolutely necessary, but it's relatively easy. Landing on Mars, in my opinion, isn't easy at all. It's quite a bit more difficult than Earth and far more difficult than the Moon. But that procedure is basically something that you can follow. So hopefully that offered some helpful information, and I look forward to seeing your next attempt. So that's it.